Hello, and welcome to the latest podcast of the AI Guides. And I'm John Stroud, joined as always by my colleague, Jen Schelling.
Hi there.
And today on the podcast, we have as a guest Matt Larocque, who is the manager of crisis communications at the Canadian Deposit Insurance Corporation. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you.
And just to kick off, could you tell people a little bit about yourself, Matt, and what sort of technical background do you have?
Absolutely. So in terms of technical background, it will be very, very quick. I have none. I'm a manager of crisis communications for the Canadian Deposit Insurance Corporation, which is a federal crown corporation whose mandate it is to protect Canadians' deposits in banks. And before that, I was 11 years with CATSA, the Aviation Security Authority, as a spokesperson.
Great.
And so can you tell us about some of the problems that you were facing at CDIC, like especially as the pandemic started to hit?
Right. So, well, before we hit the problems, I think our main goal, one of our main goal, though, is to promote confidence in the financial systems in Canada. And to do that, we communicate a ton of information on various platforms about the safety of the financial systems, about what we do, about the safety of people's deposits in banks. We always look at better ways of delivering that information. We do advertising, we do social media, we have lots of information on our website. We have a call center where people can call if they have concerns or questions. So it's always a continuous improvement process. And we started to think about how potentially AI could help us deliver that information. So if people go on our website, they can't find what they want, then maybe there's a virtual assistant or AI that could help them find the information that they needed. So the goal initially was to just improve how people can access that important information that helps promote the confidence, the confidence in the system. So we looked at a bunch of AI programs, very high end, some very expensive, some very off the shelf, very cheap, quote unquote cheap program that were available on just a website for free or with a paid version. And so we had all sorts of demonstration or presentations, right, from vendors who were interested in selling their products. But at the same, so we were talking about those programs and platforms with our technical staff, and they were not too thrilled. There were all sorts of security questions and technical questions that we were not able to answer. There was also, for some of the more high-end products, the question of the cost. Some of them were cost prohibitive. So at the same time, at our contact center, we started to use a CRM platform. So a system that manages data on the number of calls, the topics that are being asked of our agents. So all these things. So we had this new platform, and this platform had an off-the-shelf virtual assistant that could be deployed on our website. So our technical people said, well, why don't you just look at this relationship? It's already there. They have something that's exactly what you want to do. All you have to do basically is in addition of building the virtual assistant, you'll have to pay for a couple licenses, and then it works on volume. So the more people use it, the more expensive it gets. But I think you can start very slowly and see how that goes. So initially we looked at what was available, and we sort of stepped back from the AI portion just to deploy the chat function. So the chat would pop in, and you'd be able to type your question and go directly to a call center agent if they're available. If not, you get a message, and then you're sent back either to the phone number or send an email. So that's how it started. And it created a couple of problems initially because the agents
And
were not
is
used
this
to it.
is this pre-pandemic?
Yes, it's just before the pandemic.
And
Okay.
and the point is like so there's people out there who have their savings in a financial institution and they might have a question. So they're reaching out to you as the regulator. And so it's coming into your call center. Is that right?
That's correct. That's
Okay.
correct. And our goal is just to find a better way for them to talk to us to get the information they need. So we looked at AI. Maybe we looked a little too big initially. We dialed it back, looked at what was available, and we started, baby steps with a live chat function. That was in February before the pandemic that it went live. So created a couple of problems. The agents had been with us for a very long time. They were very knowledgeable. They were good on the phone. Typing with someone is another story. So it took a very long time for them to handle a chat. When you compare the amount of time that it took to answer a call versus the amount of time that it took to manage it, to fully close a chat, it was much longer, and it sort of tied up their ability to answer calls. And there were the issues of typos and using the right terminology. When you speak, it's very different than when you type. You have to be very precise. The transcript can be saved. So they were really nervous.
That's so interesting, by the way. That's
yes.
sort of counterintuitive almost. But yeah.
Yes, and it's something that we did not plan for. We had no idea that this was going to be an issue, and we had consulted with them to some extent. And they said, yeah, sure. I mean, we talk about it on the phone. We can certainly chat about it. So we deployed it in February. It went okay, but not as smooth as we expected. But it was certainly very popular. Folks that went on our website, and instead of searching for 5 minutes, they just say, is my deposit insured at this institution? Or I have an RRSP there. What happens if the bank fails? So that was in February. Then the pandemic arrived, and folks got nervous about their savings, about if the entire economy is shut down, what impact will that have on banks, and consequently, what impact will that have on my savings? If the bank fails, what happens to my savings? So our call center was flooded with calls, including the chat function, which went through the roof. It was red hot. So they were not able to handle the number of chats. So we immediately looked with our provider for the CRM system to see if there was some sort of AI available to help us to help handle the load and lower the load for the agents as well. So within a few weeks, I would say maybe a 5-week period, we hired a consultant to help us build that virtual assistant on our website. And as soon as it went live, overnight, it took 94% of all questions on that were coming in through the chat.
Wow, that's a huge percentage.
So it was huge. So the deflection rate was way beyond what we expected. We had consulted with others to see the percent, because at first the folks still had the option to choose a live agent. So you can explore a few options.
They could go in another direction. Yeah.
If at the end of the journey you still can't be you're not satisfied with the answer, you can say talk to a live agent.
Right.
So with some of the case studies we had looked at, it was anywhere between 60 and 80%, and not a whole lot in the high 90s. And of course, it depends on the type of I guess transaction or interaction that you have with your customers. But we didn't know what to expect, but we knew it was going to be north of 50%. But overnight, it was more than 90. So much so that when we switched call center in September, we completely disabled the live chat function, because it was 1 or 2 a day that ended up choosing the live function. So the virtual assistant is taking care of every questions on the chat function of the website.
Holy moly! So what are the people doing?
Well, they answer calls. They answer calls. They manage emails because we also receive lots of emails through our call center. So they have more time to dedicate to these services, and the virtual assistant takes care of these questions coming through the website.
And that's interesting because that was their area of expertise, is answering the calls. So it's interesting that they were able to, kind of shift back to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, we look at the virtual assistant right now, and we're trying to prepare for for the worst. Like if something happens, we want to see how fast we can add new options and see how it can help us manage something else. If there are new issues that arise with the Canadian financial system, then we want to see how quickly we can modify that thing to add these options. Are you concerned about this, or are you writing about that? And then have various delivery options for messages and web pages, or even redirect to other agencies if needed.
And in terms of training the AI to answer those questions, how did that work, and who's involved in that?
So right now, the AI is pretty basic, and the next step in the project will be to use that learning ability of the AI. But right now, we just basically looked at our data, the most commonly asked questions, and the traffic on our website, the type of calls that we were getting, and we proposed various options, the sort of decision tree that folks go through. Are you looking for this? Yes, no, yes, no. And then we serve either a link or additional information. So the next step in the evolution of this project would be to tap the learning capability of the bot.
You raise a really good point there, because you were able to have a successful chatbot because you had that data in advance. It's interesting to me that you were collecting that data about what people were asking, and then you were able to use that to build your first AI, as you say, and then now you can presumably use similar data to keep improving it.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we've been using that data for just about everything we do, even all our advertising, the messages we promote on social media, what we push on YouTube. All these things are based on the data coming from the call center, coming from the website, coming from our social media channels. So the AI was no different. If we wanted to know what people were looking for, then all we did was to consult some of these charts and data points, and make sure that this was readily available for folks.
And the agents who were working there, you consulted them before you started it. So how did it unfold from their perspective? Did they like it? What would they have done differently? Anything to say about that?
So they were really excited about it initially. They thought it was a great idea. It was, keeping with the times. You need to find new ways. That's how people, search more and more. If you go to anywhere from, car dealerships to even medical clinics, you always have a virtual assistant ready to help. So they agreed that this was the way to go from, I guess, an idea perspective, but in terms of the operational perspective, I guess they did not expect it to be that. I'm not going to say complicated, but they were nervous. They were nervous because they were seeing the other, the customer typing, and they were not sure what they were going to do. And then you can't really have someone on hold while you're chatting, so they wanted to maybe go to the website and grab some information, copy paste. There's it was French, English, so at first it was really uncomfortable for a lot of them. And so what ended up happening was that it was clear that for some folks this was not for them, and it was up to our management of the call center to identify those that were comfortable with the chat, typically a younger crowd, and so instead of having the chat rerouted to any available agent, they would put maybe someone on the chat queue for the day or for half a day, and the others just do the phone calls, and that person or these couple of agents do just chat because they're more comfortable. So there was some adjustments required.
And then once the AI was introduced to be able to respond to that, how did they react?
Well, most of them did not really enjoy working the live chat. So when they saw that the AI took most of the chats away from them, they were quite fine.
Okay.
And as I mentioned before, they have other tasks for us. We send pamphlets to financial institutions and brochures and other literature, and they manage these orders and they manage the emails. So they just had more time to look at more complex questions, complex emails, and didn't have to worry about that little ping in the corner of their screen during the day.
I'm curious to follow up on that, because as you talk about this, it sounds fairly. It's a great story to hear how it progressed. I will say that on this podcast, we always try and tell people, we know we don't want to sugarcoat AI. There's always little gotchas behind the scenes. So from that point of view, are there any sort of like lessons learned or gotchas that you weren't initially expecting that you had to kind of work out on the AI side of the picture?
Well, not necessarily on the AI per se, but just the maintaining the information available for folks. So as I mentioned before, we hired a consultant that sort of helped us build that thing very quickly and launch it. But then they left, and we were left with folks that were not in our shop. We certainly did not know how to go in the back end and change, like even something simple as changing the first few questions or changing a link that is served to a customer. We didn't know how to do that, and we have folks that can do that at our end, but they were not involved in the setting up of the virtual assistant, and we didn't have a whole lot of how-to documents or procedures.
Yeah, that makes sense. Nobody was wearing that AI hat in your organization.
Exactly. Yeah. So how do we go back in? I mean, we can't hire a consultant every time we want to change a sentence or change an action of the AI. So and the folks were initially internally reluctant to take it on because it was new. So and they had to sort of go in and learn themselves how that worked. Our technical people. So now they can help us. But it took a while for them to go in, understand. They had a bunch of questions. So I think, making sure that going forward, those that will do the maintenance or will have to change or improve or modify the virtual assistant, make sure that they're involved and that you write as many user manuals as you can, because that's something that they had to do sort of backward.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I think that's so true, because these new technologies like AI, suddenly you are having to do a bit of capacity building on your organizational side. And as you say, if you can kind of piggyback off of the consultant's presence to do that, then so much the better. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So, and we did some of that. I mean, they left us with some information, some manuals, but it was not enough for our own folks to just go in, follow the directions, and then do something. There was a lot of work that had to be done sort of after the fact, which would have been easier had they been involved initially. Also in a crisis situation or in an emergency, you want to be able to change things quickly.
Right. Good point.
So right now, there's a process like any organization. You have to write a ticket to IT, and they put it in a queue, and so it can take a couple of days for things to get done. So having the internal expertise to do some of the more basic things that you'll need is very important, to train your people to go in and just, even if it's just one question that's on top, are you calling about, or are you looking for information on this new topic? yes, no, then go there. Just having the ability to do that within, a couple of hours is important, because then, if you're in a rush or in a real emergency, the ticketing system of your IT guys
Right.
won't cut it.
That's a great point. And so now, like stepping back a little bit and thinking over the course of the whole project, if somebody from another government department in a communication shop or somewhere else was wondering about, is a chatbot that's supported by AI, is that a good use for us? What sort of advice would you give them? Any sort of lessons you would share?
Well, I think start small would be one, because again, as I mentioned before, the very first presentation we had was a very well known, very big. Well, I'm not sure if it's big, but very high end AI, and we had demonstrations. I think in Australia, of how they could go into your phone and lock it yourself. If you lost your phone, for example, you could just go online, type your code, and the AI would say you tell them that you lost your phone. They would the AI could automatically look at your. So there was lots of nice functions that were way too advanced for us. I mean, what we were looking to do really is to deliver information in a convenient fashion to Canadians coming to our site. So, knowing what you want to do and what you don't want to do going in is important. And don't go for the Cadillac immediately. And so, baby step. Look at what you have. Sometimes you have relationship with vendors that already have off-the-shelf products that might just work for you. So I think, leveraging those relationships, if you have them, and it is all can save you time and money. Again, I think looking at the data, if you have data on whatever it is that you want to achieve, or the operations that you want to improve, or the problem you want to solve, then make sure that what you will want your AI to do actually is based on these patterns, or these data points that you have.
That's great. And when you were assessing those options, how did you judge between one option and another? Like, if you're talking about these vendors from Australia and so forth, who did you turn to for expertise and insight on that?
Well, we turned to our own experts. Some of our colleagues had some expertise and knowledge in AI, so we got feedback from them. We had other relationships with other vendors that had used AI, or had clients that had used
Okay.
AI. So we looked at that, and someone internally said that person worked at an accounting firm before, and they too were flooded by phone calls a few times a year, and they looked for a solution. And it was very basic, something they set up themselves on their website, free of charge for the basic version, and maybe $20 a month for the more advanced version. And he said, look, we did that, and we had a couple of very basic functions that it did, and we turned that on, and I don't know, when it was a tax season, or if something crazy happened, and it really helped us. So maybe that's all you need for now. So sort of, it's a colleague that sort of came out of the blue. Hey, I heard you looking for AI or chat, live chat or chatbot. Well, I use that there. So we use these different perspectives to sort of better frame what we were looking for. And we ended up going to with something that we already had and we didn't know. So
Right. Super.
I'm tempted. So John, do you have more?
No, that's it. So I think it's now
more
your
questions,
favorite
or
question.
shall I ask
Yeah.
the favorite question,
Yeah.
which is, I will say we always ask this question at the end because we'd like to give people a chance to be a little creative and sort of give us a sense of what they think of AI. And so the question is, if you had access to a powerful AI that would help you out and do what you asked, what would you ask? Sort of like Jarvis in Iron Man. What would you ask that AI to do for you?
So it would be related cooking. So I have my kids every second week. My wife and I, my ex-wife and I don't live together anymore. So my girls are with me every second week, and cooking for them is very complicated because they're difficult. They don't like Asian spices, and I do, and
there's some
yeah, and oh yeah,
difference
we
of
had that
opinions there.
at mom last week, and
Right.
so my AI assistant
This is great.
would know, you know, what they had at their mother's, would know what's in my fridge, what we had the week
Right.
before, what's on sale, what I purchased, what I cook, and then maybe propose a menu that it would know my kids would like, and that's there's some variety from what they had before, and you know, all good things that I know will like, and you know, you link that again with specials at the grocery stores.
Yes.
You know,
Nutrition.
Oh yes, nutrition. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like a meal planner that would optimize your meals, taking into account all of these different pieces.
Yes, Canadian products, Quebec products, you know, locally produced.
And then
you could
evolve
set
with their
that up
taste.
to a maximum number of kilometers between where it was harvested and
That's right.
in the house.
Local, eat local. And would you then get the AI to make the food for you, or would you?
No.
Like you're like, that's me, but
yeah, I love cooking.
okay,
I love cooking,
so you're like,
I love
and it will stop there,
experimenting.
right?
But but my kids often don't agree with
They're
my
like,
choices.
no.
Well,
That's a great answer.
that is really great. We love it. And so, Matt, thank you very much for taking the time. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with people before we wrap up?
No, but I think just staying alert to what your tool can do. I know there's a ton of things that we could leverage that we're not right now for different reasons, resources being one of them. But just make sure that this thing doesn't remain stale. That it learns, that it provides all that you maximize the tool. There are often functions that you're not aware of that could be very helpful to your customers or to the operations that you want to improve. So just, you know, staying alert to all these cool things that it can do.
Super. And if people maybe in another government department wanted to ask you questions about how your project went, can they connect with you on LinkedIn or some other way?
Absolutely. LinkedIn is a great way. Yep.
Fantastic. So we'll include your address in the show notes. So thank you very much. We really appreciate you taking the time and sharing with us about this project.
Absolutely.
Cheers.
Very interesting project. Yeah.
It was fun.
Okay.